It was a quiet evening when Benjamin Crawford, a self-made millionaire, walked into his daughter's home for an unannounced visit. He had always prided himself on being a caring father, someone who had nurtured his daughter, Jessica, with love and provided her with a luxurious upbringing. However, the sight that greeted him as he entered the modest house stopped him cold. His daughter was on her knees, tears streaming down her face as she scrubbed the floor with trembling hands. Jessica's face was pale, her once vibrant spirit seeming drained away. Her husband, Alan, sat nearby, watching her without a hint of compassion or concern. At that moment, something broke inside Benjamin, his protective instincts flared, and he knew he couldn't stand by and let this continue. But what he would do next would leave everyone around him in utter shock. Title: A millionaire entered his son-in-law's house and saw his daughter crying while clearing the floor. He left everyone horrified with what he did. Benjamin Crawford had built his fortune from scratch. Coming from a humble background, he had worked tirelessly to create his business empire. As he grew his wealth, he also grew his family, and Jessica was his pride and joy. She had been raised with every advantage: private schooling, travel, and luxury. But despite all of this, Benjamin never let her forget the value of hard work and integrity. He had instilled in her the belief that respect and love were the foundation of any relationship. Jessica met Alan shortly after college. Alan was charming, ambitious, and seemed to love Jessica deeply. At first, Benjamin welcomed Alan into the family with open arms, seeing him as a young man with potential. But over time, Benjamin started noticing small cracks in Alan's character: cruel jokes, dismissive comments, and a coldness that appeared whenever things didn't go Alan's way. Jessica, ever loyal, brushed these off, always making excuses for her husband's behavior. Benjamin had kept his suspicions to himself, not wanting to interfere in his daughter's marriage, but the unease lingered. His worst fears were confirmed when he visited their home on that fateful evening. As Benjamin opened the door to his daughter's house, he was struck by how different it felt from her childhood home. The once warm and inviting atmosphere was gone, replaced by something oppressive, suffocating even. The air felt thick with tension, and the silence was unsettling. He had called ahead, but no one had answered, so he assumed they were busy. But what he saw when he entered the living room was beyond what he could have imagined. There was Jessica, kneeling on the floor, tears falling silently as she scrubbed a stain on the wooden boards. Her hands were red from the harsh chemicals, her shoulders hunched in defeat. Alan sat on the couch, flipping through his phone as though nothing were wrong, sipping a drink and ignoring her completely. Benjamin's heart ached as he watched his daughter, broken and diminished. This was not the bright, confident young woman he had raised. Something had gone terribly wrong. His fists clenched as he tried to maintain his composure, but the anger rising in his chest was hard to suppress. "Jessica, what's going on?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. Jessica froze, startled by his sudden appearance. She glanced up at her father, her tear-streaked face a mask of guilt and fear. "Dad! I didn't know you were coming," she whispered, quickly wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I called," Benjamin said, glancing at Alan, who still hadn't looked up from his phone. "What are you doing? Why are you—" "It's nothing," Jessica interrupted, her voice shaky. I made a mess, and I'm cleaning it up." "She's cleaning because she spilled wine on the floor," Alan said casually, finally acknowledging Benjamin's presence. It's her mess. She needs to clean it. Benjamin's jaw tightened. She's your wife, not a maid. Alan shrugged, unfazed. If she makes a mess, she should clean it. That's how it works. The indifference in Alan's voice pushed Benjamin to the edge. He could feel his pulse quickening, but he kept his tone controlled. Jessica, get up. You don't have to do this. Jessica hesitated, glancing nervously at Alan. It's fine, Dad, really. I'm almost done. No, it's not fine, Benjamin said, his voice firmer now. Get up. Jessica slowly stood, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't afraid of the mess, she was afraid of Alan. As Benjamin tried to process what he was witnessing, memories of his suspicions about Alan rushed to the forefront. He had ignored the small signs, but now it was clear, Alan was not the man he appeared to be. He was manipulative, cruel, and controlling. And his daughter was trapped. Jessica, Benjamin said quietly, has this happened before? She didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes. Her eyes filled with tears again, and she lowered her head, unable to meet his gaze. Alan stood up, setting his drink down with an exaggerated sigh. Look, Benjamin, I know you're protective of your daughter, but this is our home, our marriage. You don't get to come in here and dictate how we live. How you live? Benjamin echoed, his voice rising. What kind of life is this? Making her cry, forcing her to scrub floors while you sit there doing nothing? You're overreacting, Alan said, rolling his eyes. This is how things work in a marriage. You wouldn't understand because you've always been too soft with her. She needs structure. She needs to know her place. Her place. Benjamin repeated, incredulous. His temper flared. Her place is with a man who respects and loves her, not someone who treats her like a servant. Alan scoffed. She's my wife. What happens in our house is none of your business. But Benjamin had heard enough. He turned to Jessica, his expression softening. Sweetheart, you don't have to stay here. You can come home with me. Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but Alan stepped forward, blocking her path. She's not going anywhere, he said, his voice dripping with menace. The air in the room thickened with tension. Benjamin could feel the situation escalating, but he wasn't about to back down. His daughter's well-being was at stake, and he would do whatever it took to protect her. Benjamin stepped forward, his towering presence now filling the room. His heart pounded, and the thought of what Alan might have been doing to his daughter all these years filled him with fury. Move out of her way, Benjamin said, his voice cold and authoritative. Alan smirked, crossing his arms. Or what? You think your money gives you power here? This is my house. Alan, Jessica whispered, pleading, please don't do this. But Alan ignored her, staring defiantly at Benjamin. She's staying here, and if you don't like it, you can leave. Benjamin was a man of reason, someone who had built his life on logic and strategy. But at that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was his daughter's safety. Without warning, Benjamin grabbed Alan by the collar and pulled him away from Jessica. You've mistreated her for the last time, he growled. If you ever touch her, if you ever make her cry again, I swear I will destroy you. Alan struggled in Benjamin's grasp, but he was no match for the older man's strength. "Get your hands off me," he spat, but there was fear in his eyes now. "I'm taking her with me," Benjamin said, his voice steady but filled with rage. "And you will never lay a hand on her again." Alan glared at him, but he knew he was beaten. There was no winning this confrontation. "Fine," he muttered, straightening his shirt as Benjamin released him. "Take her. But don't think this is over." Benjamin ignored him and turned to Jessica, who stood frozen, still in shock from the intensity of the confrontation. "Let's go, Jess," he said softly, taking her hand. For a moment, she hesitated, glancing at Alan, as though some part of her still felt bound to him. But then she looked at her father, the man who had always protected her, and she knew she couldn't stay. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and allowed her father to lead her out of the house. As they drove away, the tension in the car was palpable. Benjamin kept glancing at his daughter, heartbroken by how defeated she looked. This was not the vibrant, happy woman she had once been. Alan had taken so much from her, and it would take time for her to heal. "Dad," she said quietly, breaking the silence, "I'm sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Benjamin replied, his voice gentle but firm. "None of this is your fault." "I should have seen it sooner," she whispered. "I should have left before it got this bad." Benjamin reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're out now. That's what matters." Jessica looked out the window, the weight of the last few years pressing down on her. "Do you think I'll ever be okay again?" Benjamin's heart ached for her. "Yes, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know. And I'll be with you every step of the way." The following months were difficult for Jessica as she adjusted to life without Alan. She moved back in with her father temporarily, and with his support, she began to rebuild her life. Therapy helped her process the emotional abuse she had endured, and slowly, she regained her confidence and sense of self-worth. Alan, on the other hand, tried to reach out to Jessica multiple times, but she never responded. He even attempted to challenge Benjamin in court, but with Benjamin's resources and determination, Alan's efforts were quickly crushed. In time, Jessica found peace. She learned to love herself again and to recognize her own strength. She pursued her passions and surrounded herself with people who truly cared for her. And as for Benjamin, he never stopped protecting his daughter, but he also learned to let her grow on her own. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of Benjamin's grand estate, watching the sunset, Jessica turned to her father and smiled. "Thank you for saving me," she said softly. Benjamin looked at her, pride and love filling his heart. "I'll always be here for you, Jess. No matter what." And in that moment, Jessica knew that, no matter how dark her past had been, her future was bright. With her father's unwavering support, she had found her way back to herself. The nightmare was over, and she was free. The end.